And so on that terrible day, September 10th, 2025, our greatest evangelist for American liberty became immortal. He's a martyr now.
I'm James Matthews in Phoenix, Arizona.
And I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's data and forensics correspondent, also in Arizona. And James and I have been at the site of the Charlie Kirk Memorial. We're sitting in front of the stage right now.
Yeah, MAGA in mourning. That's what we witnessed here, Tom. A stage show to remember, certainly, and one to pay tribute to Charlie Kirk. And they were all here, the great and the good from the Trump administration, the White House. They actually flew 2 plane loads to Arizona. The man himself, well, he topped the bill, Donald Trump. And today, Tom, you're here on a kind of special trip. This will be something of a special episode to reflect on what's been a frenetic 10 days, which, might be a tectonic shift in US politics. We're still seeing how it's playing out, but it's not pretty. So, Tom, here we are inside State Farm Stadium, 63,000-seater home of the Arizona Cardinals for the memorial of Charlie Kirk. People were turned away from this because the stadium reached capacity, and organisers, they're saying as many as 100,000 people were there in the end. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I suppose that's exactly it to start with. The sheer scale of this is something. It's a football stadium of an NFL team. They actually had to fill 2 other stadiums down the road, different sports, the whole gamut. This was really, really big, and it's all based around Turning Point USA, right? So that's Charlie Kirk's organisation, and he's had big crowds before. Nothing as big as this, not in terms of a bill as big as this. It's basically the whole cabinet that's flown here. Yeah. Serious issues if there was anything to happen in terms of the line of succession. But I think beyond that, it really felt less a memorial, more a political rally, a recruitment drive. You could see all the booths around. They were getting people signing up, getting stickers, badges, all of that. But I was really struck too by a bit of the messaging around it, and it was, that real full-throated, unapologetic sort of Christian, almost Christian nationalism, but certainly a really active Christianity. And that, we heard that from the speakers. A lot of people saying that, I think there was the first pastor who said that for Charlie Kirk, politics was an on-ramp to Jesus, and he saw that as his mission. I think that was the flavour we got today. It was really, really big on religion and religion's place in American public life, because that's a lot of the the goal of this organisation, is to reclaim that place, and they see it almost as a civilizational battle. This is good versus evil, and these guys see themselves as the good guys.
Yeah, so many people wanted to get into this place that it was actually difficult for us early this morning, wasn't it? What time did you
when did we leave? At sort of 3:30?
3:30, something like that.
And then we got here and it was a lot of hurry up and wait. And
we couldn't get near it.
Yeah.
I think we both were. We certainly were about 20 minutes away. Had to abandon the car.
Yeah, well, we took a wrong turning and then had to come back. And so we were a little bit behind you.
Yeah.
But then, it was obviously the huge security operation.
Yeah.
A, because of what happened to Charlie Kirk. B, you've got the President of the United States, who's also survived assassination attempts. So there was huge amount of security. We could see snipers up on the buildings, the hotels around.
It was about 2-3 hours to get inside the door.
It was really a long old way. And I haven't covered this sort of stuff before. Really, I haven't been to these rallies, so I didn't know what to expect. I don't know if that's how it usually goes.
Well, different certainly. I think the challenge for Donald Trump and the administration was different. It felt very much like a political rally, and certainly that's how it veered towards the end, certainly of Donald Trump's speech. But I think the reason they were out here in force, we had, the top tier of the Trump administration, they were here because of the support that Charlie Kirk built. And we saw them all around, that youth vote, that Christian nationalist vote that Trump has to harness and carry forward.
And some of it, we're talking about that Christianity is not Donald Trump does a lot of things, pretty well. He's never been a massively convincing sort of man of faith.
No.
But he talked about that a lot. But also what came across from his sort of eulogy, and it did feel like, it became the usual slightly rambly, slightly jokey bit in times. But you could see there was a lot of gratitude towards Charlie Kirk. He said he helped him win the election. The reason they were standing, the reason Trump was saying he could do the things he was doing, bringing America back from a dead country to the hottest country on earth, as he said.
Not heard that one before.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually we
have. But looking around, you could see it, and everyone holding up these signs. This is a really important political movement, and we can talk, I guess, about where it goes next and what Erica Kirk Charlie Kirk's widow, now the chief executive of that movement, does. But it's really well organized. It's really powerful. It helped Donald Trump win the election. It helped him, especially, and he said it gave him a majority of voters under 30 for the first time for a Republican. That was a huge, huge deal, and that's not usually how voting patterns have gone in the past. And that was what Charlie Kirk did, and is why they were here to lionize him.
Yeah, Kirk was credited by Trump with helping boost that support amongst young voters, young men in particular, where Trump's share jumped to 46%. That was up 7 points from 2020. So Kirk delivered big time for him. And you know, Trump, yes, he spoke politics, and this event was laced with politics. But Trump, to be fair to him, he spoke very warmly and at length about Charlie Kirk, said that he was due a profound and eternal debt of gratitude.
I know I speak for everyone here today when I say that none of us will ever forget Charlie Kirk, and neither now will history. Because while Charlie has been reunited with his Creator in heaven, his voice on earth will echo through the generations, and his name will live forever in the eternal chronicle of America's greatest patriots. He will live forever.
In terms of that speech, I think it was interesting. There was that, as you've been saying, that real gratitude towards Charlie Kirk, those political points, but especially in the aftermath of what we've seen, talking about getting the Department of Justice to go after, paid agitators on the radical left lunatics, as he puts them. A bit of that revenge. And when he was saying how Charlie Kirk didn't have hate in his heart, we said he has the opposite. I've got plenty of hate for my opponents. Charlie Kirk would call me up on that. That suggests his campaign.
It was quite light-hearted on that occasion, wasn't it?
Light-hearted with the full, threat
nobody doubted
it. You've got the whole federal government and everything else he can throw at it.
He was a missionary with a noble spirit and a great, great purpose. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erica. But now Erica can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent.
And that sort of chimed with, some of the other speakers we had. You sort of vowing that revenge almost, Stephen Miller in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of scary. And I was speaking to one person actually, so we've been up and down the country reporting on Charlie Kirk, where he came from, where the movement's going. We're speaking to people, someone we met up in Chicago who drove 26 hours to come to this rally and memorial. And that's the stuff that resonated for him. He is a Christian nationalist. He described himself as that. And the message of sort of forgiveness, that didn't land. The fight. That message landed for him. He's not interested. Stephen Miller's not interested in those calls for unity. It's about pressing home the advantage, I think, that I think they can both be affected by his death and take it and feel it personally, because he was a very close friend to lots of people, but also see this as an opportunity to further a political agenda.
Yeah, Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff, a month ago, he described the Democratic Party as a domestic extremist organisation. And some of the quotes, I'm looking at them now from him today, talking about, our lineage and our legacy hails back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia. Talking about what is virtuous, what's noble, those trying to incite violence against us, hatred against us. What do you have? You have nothing. You have nothing, he said. You are wickedness, your jealousy, your envy, you are nothing. Strong stuff from Stephen Miller. I actually thought he was slightly out on his own. Hegseth, RFK Jr., they played a pretty straight bat in terms of tribute to Charlie Kirk, but it was all funneling towards the audience, the Christian nationalist audience, the youth audience that they need in 2028 more than Donald Trump does.
Yeah, they were certainly doing. There's J.D. Vance probably sort of combined the two the best, but that Stephen Miller stuff's really striking. Again, it's that, if you're calling your enemies wicked, there's not grounds for compromise there. There's no meeting in the middle with someone who's wicked, and it's what a lot of people here believe when we've gone to speak to them. Yeah. I would say there's a lot of people who don't believe that, who do believe in what they see as what Charlie Kirk espoused, which is having that debate, having that engagement, and that was celebrated today. Lots of people would disagree with that characterization too. But that sort of civilizational struggle, sort of saying, J.D. Vance said the same thing, that Charlie Kirk was Athens and Jerusalem in that he was a rational man and a man of faith too, but he's also an American first and foremost. There's that tension there, isn't there, between, do you want a Christian American, which a lot of people here do, and how does that work with the First Amendment, where it's about freedom of expression, all the rights around it, freedom of religion. I think there is a tension there. This crowd is not interested in that tension. There is one side of it, but there is a whole America here, and that's what they see as, that's what's at stake for them, that civilizational thing.
Yeah, our sources in the White House tell us J.D. Vance he's the man being touted as the replacement for Charlie Kirk in terms of engagement, interaction with the people who were inside the stadium.
The cheer he got, I think, was, apart from the president himself, I think that was the biggest one. And I was quite surprised to hear that. He talks a lot about free speech. We can talk about free speech and how that is being prosecuted or not by the current administration, but he got a really, really big cheer. On the other hand, though, Erica Kirk, who's now become the chief executive of it, gave a very different speech, I thought, and actually a very powerful speech at times, and you could look at her as a potential politician in the future. She's got this whole huge organization now that she's in charge of. She's certainly going to be a power player. She probably is already a power player, but that could be something more if she wanted to maybe try and be president, vice president, perhaps with J.D. Vance. Who knows?
Yeah, hard to gauge, I thought, certainly at the moment. I mean, she's a grieving widow, and this all, lost her husband, 10, 11 days ago. She did speak very much as a grieving widow. But, if the political story is all about what happens next, the human story is all about what happened to Charlie Kirk. And Erica Kirk, well, she spoke powerfully, first of all, about going to see her husband in hospital.
God's love was revealed to me on the very day my husband was murdered. On the afternoon of September 10th, I arrived at a Utah hospital to do the unthinkable, to look directly at my husband's murdered body. I saw the wound that ended his life. I felt everything you would expect to feel. I felt shock. I felt horror and a level of heartache that I didn't even know existed. But there was something else too. Even in death, I could see the man that I love. I saw the one single gray hair on the side of his head, which I never told him about. Now he knows. Sorry, baby, I'm telling you now, but never told him. Didn't want to. I also saw this. I also saw on his lips the faintest smile. And that told me something important. It revealed to me a great mercy from God in this tragedy.
Another powerful moment, Tom, was when she addressed her husband's killer.
My husband, Charlie, he wanted to save young men, just like the one who took his life. That young man. On the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him. I forgive him because it was what Christ did and is what Charlie would do.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really big moment, I thought. We've been talking about some of the divisive language we heard, Stephen Miller and other people, and that really muscular Christianity, your enemies are wicked. But here was the other version, which I don't think we heard until that point. The widow of a man who'd been killed saying to that man who killed her husband, I forgive you. And it was hard for her to say, there's no doubt about that. But it was, it silenced the room completely and was really, really powerful. And that's a sort of message I don't think we heard anywhere else. And it was a very unique part of it, I think.
Yeah, and of course the occasion finished with Donald Trump finishing his speech, calling her onto stage, and the two hugged. So, as a spectacle, actually I thought Donald Trump was quite awkward. I think he is in these occasions. But to see the two individuals and Erica Kirk in particular, moving, very powerful.
And there's been so much debate, and there's plenty to debate about, but we shouldn't forget the reason we're here. I know it felt like a political rally. It was a political rally, but it was also a memorial for a man who was shot, and also not just sort of murdered, but murdered in front of hundreds of millions of people who saw that on their smartphones, a horrific video. And that relationship here, I think there was a lot of emotion in the crowd because people thought they had that relationship with Charlie Kirk. They listened to his show, they watched him all the time, that sort of parasocial relationship, to use a weird academic term. So when that happened, and when they've seen someone they have a relationship get murdered on their smartphone, I think it makes for sort of a very emotional moment.
Yeah, we spoke to people who were here present, and what you say is absolutely true. There was a connection between people here and Charlie Kirk.
Well, I can tell you, he was changing our young people to turn their faces to God. So that's the primary reason. He was also turning the young people to understand that they're allowed to speak their mind, whether you agree or disagree. We're allowed to have civil discourse, and that's what he stood for, and that's what he illuminated, because we've met him, we've been in his presence, so.
I had the opportunity to come, and I said, Brittany, can I come in your car? And we drove 10 hours. Yes, but it was worth it, and I'm so glad to be here. We weren't going to get in, but it's just powerful to be in the midst of all these people and be gathered together.
I'm so grateful to Jesus Christ because I know that Charlie Kirk's gone on earth, but he lives in heaven with Jesus Christ. And I'm so happy to be here to honor his legacy and his life.
The thoughts there of people present. Let me ask you this, Tom. Do you know who Kyle Rittenhouse is?
Yeah, the man who shot...
Yes. Well, he shot three people. One survived, two were killed. Yeah. I was actually there. This was in 2020. There were riots in Kenosha. He, 17 at the time, had gone, with his weapon to guard property and so on. And I remember the sound. I remember the snapping of the gun. It was 1 block away. And, he was duly arrested. And I thought, well, we'll never see him again. Yeah. But, he was cleared in court. Self-defense was the argument. And, he was a free man. He was here today, this Kyle Rittenhouse. And, listen, he wasn't saying very much. But I took the opportunity to ask him a quick question.
What did Charlie Kirk mean to you?
Charlie was a hero, and he made a lot of change.
There you go, Kyle Rittenhouse, a supporter clearly of Charlie Kirk. I spoke to another one on the way here, Tom. I was actually at Ronald Reagan Airport in Washington, and there was a guy checking in. He was wearing a T-shirt, and he turned my head because it had the slogan, "I support ICE" on it, and I thought, well, that's going to get you noticed. I got on the plane, and Sarah, our producer, she said, "Scott Pressler's on our flight," and it turns out it was the same guy who was a campaigner for Trump, helped to turn Pennsylvania at the last election, very strong campaigner. And there was a link to a New York Post article, and this is their description of this guy. With the luscious mane, the cowboy boots, the V-neck revealing a hairy chest, Pressler at once resembles Aragorn of Lord of the Rings and a founding father. So there you go, not talking him down. Anyway, listen, Scott Pressler very kindly agreed to a quick interview. It gives you an impression of what's going on the fringes of all of this.
I have spent the last 10 days finding person after person that celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I've used my platform of 2.3 million to peacefully expose them, to identify them, and we're making sure that any person who would dare celebrate his assassination, they shouldn't be in education, they shouldn't be in healthcare, and quite frankly, how could we trust such a person to help us here in our country if they're going to celebrate death and not life? And so I'm going to use my platform to continue exposing these people, one by one, day by day. There are people in our country that simply want me murdered because I am a conservative, and that's what happened to Charlie Kirk. And there are people like myself and my influence that, who knows, could I be next? Am I the next one on the chopping block because I dare to have conservative values and I support the President of the United States? And so this is a very real life or death situation for people like me and other American citizens.
Tom, you have been in the States for a few days now, traveling the country. We're going to see your work in due course on all Sky News platforms. Tell me, what's your sense of what you've seen and where America is right now?
I think the sort of permission that Charlie Kirk gave a lot of people in sort of different places. So, when we went to the suburbs of Chicago, where he's from, speaking to young people who said, I didn't realize I could be a conservative and a Christian and have those views. And I think, and be proud of those and, insist I'm not a hateful person. A lot of people would say that Charlie Kirk was a hateful person because of his views on gay marriage, on Islam. He would contest that, obviously. I think what this will do on the back of that is it's even more permission. You've had the President of the United States, you've had 63,000 people in this stadium, and then millions of people watching. You've had Elon Musk here as well.
Yeah. They were back. Did you see them back together again?
They were back together, the little bromance,
shaking hands, and it was
they're falling out
again.
Maybe. And apparently that was Charlie Kirk.
They might be falling back in.
It can't last long, can it? It never does with them.
Yeah, correct.
But I do think it is that. If those people think, okay, I found this person on TikTok or whatever social media they're following him on, and thought, okay, this is interesting, I'm going to get some grief for this. They look at a rally like this and realize, actually, this isn't just sort of a fringe position. This is something I can really take. So I think they keep talking about building a legacy here. That's the sort of subtitle of this event. I think that has been pretty successful. And I think a lot of people we spoke to all around the way here are going to see that. I don't think what today does is take the heat out of it. Actually, some of those speeches that we've talked about, the organisation involved, I think it's sort of full steam ahead for whatever side you're on. There's not sort of the people we spoke to talked about, we need to be a bit more contemplative, reflective, quieter, meet in the middle, have a bit more unity. It's the United States of America, one person said that's what we need to be. That's that sort of moderate, reasonable position is getting drowned out by, I would say, both sides as well.
One thing that did come out of Donald Trump's speech was something that nobody was expecting, I think, a health announcement. He says it will be made in the company of RFK Jr. and TV presenter turned politician Dr. Oz. Tomorrow, he says, news of a change in the medical approach to autism.
I think we found an answer to autism. How about that? Autism. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking in the Oval Office in the White House about autism, how it happens, so we won't let it happen anymore.
Yeah, not normally how you have big medical announcements made. Donald Trump clearly desperate to bolt on the policy to the occasion, give them a headline to take away. We'll see the full detail in due course and no doubt the fallout. Just before we go, Tom, we should mention the Pentagon cracking down on access for journalists. Simply put, defense officials, they announced on Friday that every story written up by a journalist about the Pentagon, or the Department of War as it's now called, needs to be authorized by the department before publication, even if the material in the report is not classified. Journalists are being told if they ignore this rule, their press credentials will be revoked. So a clear message to journalists that towing the line with the department is more important perhaps than transparency for the American people.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost the textbook definition of censorship. It's what happens in wartime when you take things out, and multiple press associations have denounced it. So have some Democratic senators too, saying it's a clear infringement on a free press, and That's been a topic since the murder of Charlie Kirk. We've seen that with Jimmy Kimmel being removed from ABC, other things, and this idea that Republicans and the administration, free speech for me but not for thee, basically, and it's not cancel culture, it's consequences culture is what they're saying. It's quite hard to square with the notion of free speech and everything that we're supposed to be here today to remember.
Yeah, and I suppose it creates a situation where you have a military making news by issuing its own press releases. 30 odd years ago, I was in the first Gulf War, was embedded actually with the British military, and clearly there were different roles there as an accredited war correspondent. The British military would red pencil your copy. They had the final say over what went out. They had a meeting before the push on Kuwait City, sat us down and said, look, none of you can report British casualties. And we thought, well, hang on a minute. I mean, the single most important aspect for us of British involvement in this conflict, in the push towards Kuwait City, is how the Brits get on and what the casualties are. But there was no argument. The military played it their way. That's what they wanted. And, you can argue what was the right thing to do in that situation, but the Pentagon are very clearly saying, look, we're in charge, and it creates that kind of wartime situation when we are not at war. They're in charge of details. And I do wonder, there was that recent story in the Atlantic when Pete Hegseth created this WhatsApp group and revealed
the signal
the Middle East strikes.
Yeah.
That story would never have got out. They would have had his agreement for that story to be published, which of course he would not have given. So that's the situation that's being created.
Yeah, and that sort of situation, again, the free speech, it doesn't really square. Even when I was, reporting in China, we didn't have those restrictions on us. We could do that. So if you're going to be less free than communist China, number one enemy over here, that's quite something.
Tom, it's been great to have you on Trump 100. Have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, it's been lovely in the end zone as well. This is nearly as good as St. Mary's Stadium.
Yeah, a massive event thrown together at very short notice. One of my American colleagues said the only thing she could remember similar to this was the Michael Jackson funeral. Massive event thrown together at short notice and doing justice to its subject.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie Kirk and Michael Jackson, the soundtrack here is very different. Christian rock all the way
Christian
through.
rock or YMCA. Mark will be back tomorrow from New York as the UN General Assembly meets with several European countries formally recognising Palestinian statehood. Plenty of that and more tomorrow on the podcast. Tom, many thanks. See you again.
Cheers, James. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. All the best.